Alright, it's the next day, and two things are going to happen in this video. One, I'm going to upgrade this laptop with the 500 gig NVMe drive that I just got done formatting. This is the 500 gig NVMe from my main desktop, which I gave to my father. And after that is done, well, actually I'm going to do something else first. Alright, so for a slightly different video today, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to upgrade the storage on this laptop here, the main boot drive storage to a 500 gig NVMe drive from my my desktop I gave to my father last night. And I'm going to put Windows 11 on this thing because this thing fully supports Windows 11. But first, what I want to do is I want to take my unruly 6600 XT and try it in another system. Something that people have been saying, why not I do? Well, there's a very obvious reason. Well, for those that have been watching my YouTube channel for a while, you would know I have a secondary machine. This is a said secondary machine. It is a sleeper build, but still a pretty potato sleeper. It's using an i5 from 2012 as an i5-2400, I believe 12 gigs of RAM, and currently a GTX 950. It's at the very edge of being a bottleneck. With that said, this card in this machine here is going to bottleneck like hell. But if this card works in this system consistently, like unlike with my main rig, then I'll just leave the card in this computer and use it like that. But with that said, I'm going to put this thing on my desk here, pop out the side panel, and show you what the inside looks like. And here is the inside of my sleeper. The CPU core looks to be a little, there we go. I mean, it's a sleeper build through and through. There's only so much you can do with a case like this. But luckily, this card will fit in there just fine. It's actually slightly smaller than my GTX 950. Now, with that said, it may not still work because, again, we've seen how unruly this card is. But this motherboard is really old. I don't even know if this motherboard will actually even register this card. But never hurts to try. So I'm going to pull this card out, put this card in, boot the thing up, and see what happens. I don't know if that's to do with the case I'm using or some type of manufacturing tolerances with this card. But I had to push a lot of force to the back to get these holes right here to line up right. So either I didn't properly mount this board in right, or the tolerances on this card are just so off that it's just hot ass. And the reason why I say that is because, as you saw, I used to have a GTX 950 in this thing. I installed that card without an issue whatsoever. And that card is way older than this. And yet I had to just put so much pressure down this way to actually get the holes aligned so I can screw everything in. Now, with that said, this card requires a 500 watt minimum power supply to work with. I'm using my original Thermaltake 600 watt PSU, which is more than adequate to run all these components. So with that said, I'm going to hook everything up to my main monitor here because I don't know if it's going to work or not, so I'm not going to but I'm not going to put all my effort to get everything back set up here. So I'm just going to boot everything up in here since I already have all my cabling here and whatnot. So let me get all that set up and come back. Jeez, I could barely get the power cable in there right. It's just way too short because, again, I was using such a small case. And the power supply is all the way up here instead of like basically down at the deck. So with that said, let's see if this thing even powers on. That wasn't good. There we go. Don't know why I did that. Well, it's doing exactly what it did originally. I take out my old card and I put the new one in. I hit the power and the card initializes right out of the gate. Now, just because it's working right now doesn't mean when I go to shut this thing down for like 5 to 10 minutes and boot it back up again, doesn't mean it will still continue working. But as of right now, the motherboard registers the card. It seems to work, and I should be able to go to AMD's own website and download everything. But first, I need to DDU the system because I had a NVIDIA card. So that's what I'm actually going to do first. Oh, Windows, you always fail to do the most simplest of tasks. Uninstall the driver, you piece of shit. Yeah, that's what I thought. Freaking Windows. And don't get me started on Linux. I ain't changing over. Alright, so I had to restart the system as expected, and now I'm installing the GPU drivers. If this works, it's going to be one hell of a bottleneck. But I'm not expecting it to work. I'm expecting once I shut this thing down to upgrade my laptop, that when I go to reboot this thing, which is going to take about maybe 15 minutes or so to do all the upgrades on that laptop, when I go to reboot this thing, the card fails to initialize. That is what I'm expecting. And when it does, I'm going to pull this card back out, and I'm going to put my RX 950 back in. Because at least I know the RX 950 still works. Alright, time to restart it again. And initialize right out of the gate. Ew, I gotta clean my monitor. That is what you call forehead grease. As you can tell, I upgraded this thing from Windows 7 to Windows 10. So, with that said, the drivers are now installed. Everything as of right now is working. So, I'm going to do a few odds and ends off camera and come back. At least I'm getting 2000 FPS in the load screen of Genshin. 300 or 3000? That's better than my main rig, which had a Ryzen 5 1600. That moment when I get higher FPS in Genshin load screen than I did on my actual main rig that's 10 times better than this thing. Big oof. And the CPU bottleneck is severe. Well, it's not that atrocious. I mean, this is only Genshin, but the bottleneck is definitely there. But at least it's able to maintain its 60 FPS. Then again, I've got to actually get into the game world though. But yeah, I want to do a little bit of gaming before I actually shut this thing down, because I want to at least have some video evidence showing that this card is working in this system prior to shutting it down. Because again, I'm expecting this card to not initialize when I reboot it. Yep, that is most definitely a bottleneck. But it seems to be able to maintain its 100 FPS, not 100, but maintain its 60. But again, this is Genshin Impact, and I'm loading it off a hard drive. But it seems to be able to maintain itself fairly fine. Temperatures are pretty much normal. And the little shuddering you're seeing isn't due to the bottlenecking, it's because I had the game loaded on my spin drives. This is my secondary machine, so when I initially built this thing, I didn't spec it out to be a beast. I never expected to even do this in the first place. But like I said, this may not be, it may not be like this for a while, for the duration, because again, I've yet to figure out if it's actually going to work or not. But with that said, I'm going to kind of level up my secondary count. What am I, level 31 or something? I don't play this game that often on my secondary, but yeah, I'm going to spend some time in this game and really push this computer. Alright, did the 4 daily quest things you normally do for Genshin Impact, which took about maybe 30 or so minutes, give or take. So clearly everything is working right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out the game and come back. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to shut down the system. So, we have now evidence that this card works even in this old system here. So, the real question will become, what will happen when I go to reboot this thing again in about 15 or so minutes? Which is what's going to take for me to pop apart that HP laptop, swap out the drive, and get Windows 11 initially installed. Alright, so it's actually been about 30 minutes. I've been doing other things, and my father suggested I give him my GTX 950 and I take back my RX 580. Reason being, he's not gaming. So this card is utterly wasted on him. So I got my RX 580 back. A new set of RAM came in. This is going to be going into my secondary system. This one's not as good as the RAM that's in my father's machine now, but this is only 33,000. And since this is again going into my secondary machine, it's more than sufficient. I don't need that much power for what is essentially a secondary computer. But yeah. So with that said, I'm still installing Windows 11 on this thing. It's actually got done right when I was done yakking. So what's going to happen now is that it's going to boot into the actual part where you got to install, or not install, but set Windows 10, Windows 11 up. So with that, let's see if this thing boots up. I fucking hate my main I fucking hate my main machine. I really fucking do. This thing was turned off for 30 minutes. And yet, the card initialized completely fine. And we're good to go. So, my secondary system works. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to button everything up, put the side panel back on, download MSI Afterburner, and set up the fan curve. That way so the fans are always spinning on this thing. That way so it doesn't get too hot. And I'm going to put everything back down here. So, I now have a secondary machine with a complete overkilled and bottlenecked RX 6600 XT. It's going to be real interesting seeing how this thing handles ray tracing at that poor little quad core. But, as you saw, it booted up completely fine. Something my main rig could not do worth a damn. So, it's going to be interesting. And the HP laptop is restarting again, which is to be expected. But I now upgraded from a 250 gig boot drive to a 500, so this thing's going to have a lot more storage to work with. So, with that said, I don't know what I'm going to do next for this video, but yeah. Alright, so I got my laptop set up with Windows 11. I just made myself a local account, and once I get done with all this stuff here, I'm going to delete my Microsoft account because fuck you Microsoft, I want a local account. Well, Windows 11 triggered a BIOS update on my laptop even though I checked for one prior to doing all this. So here's hoping it goes by without a hitch. Luckily the battery is full, and yeah. Alright, and the BIOS update went by without a hitch. Heck, I didn't even watch it for the most part. I was out doing other stuff like laundry and whatnot. So I am keeping myself busy today. Not with all this crap, even though I am recording whenever I see fit. So, BIOS update seems to have taken. Next thing to do is make sure everything's up to date. And of course install the proper drivers to run this laptop properly. One thing is for certain, I can't wait for all this crap to be done and over with. Because I'm getting tired of this pile both here and here. Even though they're more or less out of the way, they're still a pile, they're hideous, it's annoying. But the reason why I'm not doing anything with them yet is because I'm still having these ongoing issues. So with that said, let's see if this thing boots up. Green light. And just like I thought, it boots up completely fine. And this of course is with the RX 6600 XT. Alright, so that's all messed up. I can fix that off camera. Well, this is annoying. My monitor is stuck at this resolution right here. And yet this monitor right here is a 1080p monitor. The only thing I can do is DDU the system. And yet my Dell monitor, which is at a smaller resolution, is at the proper res. It's not full 1080, but it's at the proper res. Uh-oh. Revert back. I didn't change anything, you piece of shit. Let's see, go to advanced. I believe this is a 75 Hertz panel. It is. Keep changes. Okay. So, let's shut it down. Alright, we're good. Now, I still want to have a 1080p monitor though. So, since I have this monitor working, I'm going to take this opportunity and DDU both the NVIDIA and AMD drivers. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect this thing from the internet. Alright, since everything's back up in working order again, I think it's time to see how bad of a bottleneck my Ryzen 5 really is going to be to this poor little RX 6600 XT. And to do that, I'm going to load Forza Horizon 5 onto my system here. It should run Forza. Most likely it will bitch about enough, it probably will bitch about the CPU, but it should run Forza. How well? I don't know. I don't think it's going to run that hot. I'll be surprised if I can get 30 FPS at 1080p low, or whatever the screen res of this thing is at low. Surprisingly, it did not bitch about my CPU. And I have audio. My controller works as it should. It's going to be really interesting to see what it says for preset. Also, I'm running this off a 250 gig hard drive that's pretty stinking old. So I'm actually going to pause and let it come back when this is done loading. Medium. That's a fat F. But considering the processor I'm using, it's utterly bottlenecked. Oh yeah, I forgot to show my old 750 Ti. I removed the shroud on this thing long ago and I can't remember why. I still have the shroud and I'm going to put it back on, but this 750 Ti still works to this day. This is what he's been using the Dell Optiplex 755 until I gave him my old system. And of course, I now also have taken ownership of the Sound Blaster card here. Now, considering what I'm probably going to be getting, I won't be able to use this unfortunately. But I'm still going to keep it because it is still a good sound card, and maybe my father will want to swap out to a different motherboard down the road. I don't know. But for the time being, I'm going to take ownership of this and just store it away until I can find a use for it. Same thing with my 750 Ti. Though most likely what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert the Dell Optiplex into an XP machine. And I'm going to use the 750 Ti and it's going to become one hell of a gaming machine for like basically all those old games and whatnot. Well, it took a while to optimize the game, but it did load everything up. And frame rate's actually fairly decent. Granted, I'm just staying still. And even as I'm moving, the frame rate still maintains itself above 60. Now, of course, I'm not playing everything at max settings, which is, again, to be expected considering my poor little i5 is the kneecapping part of this computer, but it still looks decent. And for what I'm asking my secondary machine to do, I'm very impressed it can even do this in the first place. So really now the next thing I need to do is make sure to monitor the temperatures to make sure the thing ain't cooking itself alive. But as it stands, this is more than playable, and on this monitor, the game looks fantastic. So surprisingly enough, my old little secondary machine is more than capable of running this game. So that means I can load up other games that are a tad bit more demanding. So hopefully, when it comes down to it, the 6600 XT doesn't die in the next 2 days. But since I've had multiple cards die on me before, I'm not holding my breath. But all I can do is hope. Because as of right now, everything is working as it should. I'm not having any booting issues or anything like that other than that weird issue with the monitor. But again, that was due to me most likely having that hooked up to the other monitor and whatnot, screwed something up. But again, everything seems to be working. I've said that before in previous uploads, but this time I actually think everything's going to be working. Now, of course, if this GPU does shit itself, I'm not going to throw it in the garbage or anything like that. I'll just take it apart, take a look at how they applied thermal paste, applied the thermal pads, just generally look over the board, and then just put it all back together and just put it away. And then I'll put my RX 580 into this system because I know my RX 580 will work completely fine. And the game occasionally does this. So it kind of spurgs, but what you gonna do? It still runs completely fine.